All right, welcome everyone to today's Explainer. I've been incredibly excited to dig into this one with you because we're going to unpack the exact operating framework that has quietly powered some of the most successful tech giants in the world. We're looking at a goal-setting system that literally transforms bold, visionary ideas into highly structured, world-class execution. So let's just dive right in.
Ideas are easy. Execution is everything. Wow, right? That is the ultimate realization from author and investor John Doerr, and we've all seen it happen. You get startups bursting with these brilliant, industry-disrupting ideas that just completely fail to lift off. Why? Because without a real framework to make tough choices, track progress, and pull the plug on losers fast, even the greatest ideas just get stuck in the mud. Execution is the universal bottleneck. In his book, Measure What Matters, Doerr takes us deep into the world of OKRs, which stands for Objectives and Key Results. Now, Doerr is a Silicon Valley legend. Back in the 1970s, he was an engineer at Intel working under the legendary Andy Grove, who actually invented this very goal-setting system. Doerr then took Grove's brilliant system and brought it to a little startup you might have heard of called Google, pitching it to Larry Page and Sergey Brin right around a ping-pong table. And, well, they never looked back.
Okay, let's get into Section 1, the anatomy of an OKR.
Doerr actually calls this framework the Swiss Army knife of management. And the first half of the equation, it's incredibly simple. The objective. The objective is simply the what. Like, what is the destination we are actually trying to reach? A strong objective is significant, concrete, action-oriented, and ideally, really inspirational. Doerr describes a well-designed objective as a literal vaccine against fuzzy thinking and fuzzy execution. It gives you a very clear mountain to climb. But you know, an objective without a path is really just a dream. And that brings us to the key results. This is the how. Key results are the strict, undeniable benchmarks that monitor how we actually get to that inspirational objective. They must be specific, time-bound, measurable, and verifiable. To quote former Google executive Marissa Mayer, "It's not a key result unless it has a number. At the end of a quarter, you either hit it or you didn't. There is absolutely zero gray area."
So, the really crucial point here is understanding how these two halves contrast and complement each other. Think of them as the yin and yang of goal setting. The objective is your visionary what. It can be long-lived, reaching far into the future. But your key results? Those are completely earthbound. They are the metric-driven how, and they evolve constantly as your daily work progresses. Once you complete all your key results, you have, by definition, achieved your objective.
To tie all this anatomy together, there's a brilliantly simple formula. We will achieve this objective as measured by these key results. This specific phrase, as measured by, was actually coined by Bill Davidow, another executive from the early Intel days. It's the critical connective tissue of the entire framework. It makes the implicit expectation explicitly clear to absolutely everyone in the organization.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 4 superpowers.
When you build a healthy OKR culture, it delivers 4 distinct superpowers: focus and commit to priorities, align and connect for teamwork, track for accountability, and stretch for amazing. Let's break each of these down to see exactly how they transform everyday workflows.
So, superpower number 1 is focus and commit. High-performance organizations don't just know what to do, they are equally crystal clear on what not to do. OKRs force leaders to make hard choices and just discard or defer all the rest. By committing to just 3 to 5 top objectives per cycle, OKRs act like a neon-lit road sign. They dispel confusion and keep everyone's efforts from scattering all over the place.
Then we have superpower number 2, align and connect. In an OKR system, goals are completely public. I mean, from the absolute most junior staff member all the way up to the CEO, everyone's objectives are in black and white for all to see. This transparency is incredible because it immediately exposes redundant efforts and demolishes those isolated departmental silos. When an individual can clearly link their day-to-day key results to the entire company's ultimate game plan, you unlock just an immense sense of ownership and teamwork.
Superpower number 3 is tracking for accountability. Because key results are entirely driven by data, they allow for constant, real-time reassessment. But the source material emphasizes a really important distinction here. This is no judgment accountability. If a key result is endangered, it doesn't trigger punishment, it triggers support. Colleagues can see the metrics slipping in public, jump in, and course-correct the workflow together.
And that brings us to the 4th superpower, and honestly, arguably the most thrilling one, stretch. Incremental goals are safe, right? They just maintain the status quo. But OKRs empower what Google calls the gospel of 10x. You replace safe goals with exponential ones. You test the absolute limits of your capability. And crucial to this whole idea is the freedom to fail. By setting seemingly impossible goals, organizations release their most creative, ambitious selves and literally invent entirely new industries.
Let's see this in action in Section 3, inside Google's playbook.
75. Get this. When this source material was published, Google had used the exact same OKR system for 75 consecutive quarters. They never ditched it for the newest management fad. As they grew from a startup into an absolute behemoth, with 7 different products boasting over 1 billion users each, I'm talking Search, Chrome, Android, YouTube, OKRs remained the essential scaffolding, holding all of that world-class execution together.
Google's playbook has some really distinct rules we can learn from. First, like we just talked about, OKRs must be big. If you're hitting all of them effortlessly, you aren't being aggressive enough. Second, key results have to describe outcomes, not activities. You don't write assess latency, you write publish latency measurements by March 7th. And here is a fascinating structural rule. Google flipped the traditional management ratio, requiring managers to have a minimum of 7 direct reports, sometimes up to 20. This intentionally flattens the org chart, reduces top-down micromanagement, and forces much greater frontline autonomy.
Google also uses this somewhat brutal but highly effective color-coded grading scale for their key results at the end of every cycle. 0.0 to 0.3 is red, 0.4 to 0.6 is yellow, and 0.7 to 1.0 is green. Now, in school, a 70% might be a C-, but at Google, that is the absolute sweet spot. It proves you stretched your team's capabilities to the maximum without completely breaking the system. Again, hitting a perfect 1.0 is rarely the point.
So how do we apply this? Section 4, setting your own goals.
When OKRs actually take root in your environment, a really profound cultural shift happens. Because everything is transparent and driven by numbers, merit suddenly trumps seniority. It doesn't matter who has the biggest title, it matters whose data shows they're actually moving the needle. Office politics and suspicion lose their toxic power. Managers stop being dictators and become coaches and mentors. Actions and hard data finally speak louder than words.
I want to leave you today with this exact, pretty provocative quote from John Doerr. In sum, objectives and key results are a potent, proven force for operating excellence. For Google, so why not for you? Whether you're running a massive startup or honestly just managing your own daily habits, if you aren't tracking your how, are you really ever going to reach your what? Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I challenge you, write your first OKR this week.